On behalf of the Greater Lowell Veterans Council, welcome to our annual Pearl Harbor Day observation. This day marks the beginning of the U.S. involvement in World War II. Please take the time to read the plaques here in the Hall of Flags and the monuments out front. Sergeant Arms, please escort Mr. Eric Lamash to the podium. Wherever you'd like to be. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please stand and continue standing until after the national anthem. Uncover. We ask our higher power to watch over us during the ceremony so that we may honor our brothers and sisters that fell on that fateful day and those who survived to avenge the atrocities and to remember their brothers and sisters. Amen. Cover. Sergeant Arms, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Two. Ms. LaMarche.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated. I'd like to thank GLVC officers, trustees, and appointees, the member organizations, our elected officials, members of the Patton Memorial Society, our speaker, Petty Officer Dudley, our bugler, Colonel Sam Polton, our firing team, our singer, Eric Lamash, the volunteer corps for providing the pastries in the back, the LMA staff for setting up today, Lowell Telecommunications for being here, and we are always honored to have the Gold Stars join us and sit at our table with us. Thank you for being here. If I missed anyone, please let me know. Sergeant Arms, please escort Petty Officer Dudley to the podium, please. Petty Officer.
morning. Let me start by saying thank you for the invitation for me to speak today. It's days like this that leave Navy sailors reflecting on the reason why we volunteered, and it leaves us reflecting on our core values of honor, courage, and commitment. It's the honor to serve in the world's finest Navy, the courage to stand up for what's right, and the commitment to not only the American people, but to veterans like yourself, whose legacy that we carry on. December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, a date that was the embodiment of how we prioritize in the Navy, utilizing ship, shipmate, and self. Pearl Harbor was one of the worst tragedies in U.S. naval history, and the monument that currently sits in Pearl Harbor stands for what cannot be repeated. Sailors Creed is a line that reads, "I represent the fighting spirit of the Navy and those who have gone before me to defend freedom and democracy around the world." The fighting spirit of the Navy, to the brave men and women who have gone before me and who put everything on the line to represent that fighting spirit. 2,403 Navy, Army, Marine, and civilian lives were lost on that day. 15 sailors and 1 Marine earned themselves the Medal of Honor on that day. 11 of the 16 were awarded posthumously. The first Navy Cross, given to an African American, came on that day. A messman, 2nd class, Doris Miller. When the fighting ensued, he hopped on a 50 cal and did everything that he could to try to save his ship, his shipmates, and himself. The USS Gerald R. Ford class carriers, the newest aircraft carrier class in the United States fleet, will also feature CVN 81, the USS Doris Miller, in his honor. The fight didn't stop on that day, though. The American people, the families, the leaders of this great nation that took that day as a call to action. The world's finest Navy that altered the way that we see naval warfare because of that day. The world's finest Navy that got retribution for Pearl Harbor and reinstilled the confidence in the U.S. military when our backs were against the wall. Fair winds and following seas to all my shipmates across all branches that fell that day. We have the watch. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Petty Officer Dudley for taking time out of his day to join us today and for speaking here today and representing the newest generation of our military and continuing the legacy that those who came from before, left us. Thank you. We're here to honor and remember those who had served, fought, survived, and died on this day 81 years ago. Often forgotten, each branch suffered losses that day. The Navy, the Marines at Pearl, but also the Army and the Army Air Corps, now the Air Force, was attacked. As it was called by President Roosevelt, and is still referred to today as a day that will live in infamy. My generation It was an event heard by our grandparents that talked about it. Talked about the tragedy of lives lost and how it unified our nation. For my parents' generation, the baby boomers, they saw the growth and prosperity of a nation as a result of our war efforts. A time when American dream was not just something you heard about or only saw in your dreams. Unfortunately, like most people, that's the only way they see it, is what they dream of today. But back then, the American dream was a reality because of the sacrifices on that day. They also saw the horrible costs of post-war. The physically, mentally, and emotionally wounded. The families that honored their brothers and sisters, aunts, uncles, husbands, and wives, and others they lost due to this day in World War II. They lived at a time of national pride, Americanism, in a time of community collectiveness and strong family and social values. For the World War II generation, they saw what would be the worst act of war against America until September 11, 2001. This nation answered its call. Industry of all types transformed their factories from civilian products to those to suit the needs of our national defense. As men went to war, women took to work at factories, building the ships in the shipyards, and filling all other roles the men left behind. The nation united like never before or since. The events of Pearl Harbor and World War II have a personal significance for me and should, if we all look back, have a personal significance for all people today. Both of my grandparents on my mother's side served in the Army in the South Pacific Theater. And an amazing man, George, was the greatest role model, male role model that I had growing up, and the closest thing that I had to a real dad. And he served in the European theater in the Army Air Corps. The events of Pearl Harbor in World War II brought people together across this nation that may have never met before. My grandfather was from the Midwest. My grandmother was from Barica. They never would have met, but because of that day, they did. Who knows who would be today had the atrocities of that day not happened? Would we be here? Would we be someone else? Pearl Harbor changed them and all that witnessed it and lived through it forever. And in turn, it influenced my grandmother and George, and from their experiences and their leadership and their influence, they molded me. It is the individual stories that are lost when we hear or read about historical events. You hear about them, you watch documentaries, you read them in a book, they're facts. But what we need to do is we need to preserve the individual stories of those who were there, those who lived it. Such as last year, we were honored by Mr. Nevezevitz, which has since passed, shared with us his story of hearing the president informing the nation of the attack on Pearl Harbor and how it affected his life And these stories need to be preserved for our future generations, so that these things do not happen again. These are personal stories of World War II that has given the men and the women that served and died the title, the greatest generation. Sergeant Arms, please escort Mr. LaMarche to the podium for God Bless America. Mr. LaMarche. God bless America. Told you it's a short program tonight. Huh? Manager. I had the Navy speak.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, through the oceans wide with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Sergeant Arms, when we go out to fire, if you could please escort Ms. Finneral and the wreath to the World War II monument. Okay. When we go to fire.
The wreath?
The wreath's back there.
That big wreath?
That big wreath.
And bring it to her?
The World War II monument.
Oh,
that I put there.
you want to stand in it?
Yeah.
Okay.
When we go fire.
All right, when are you gonna do that?
Right now? If everyone could please stand. Short program today, people. Uncover? I don't uncover. We thank our higher power for watching over us today and allowing us to join together today in honor to remember and pay respect to those who who fell on this day many years ago, and for their sacrifice to protect us so that we have our freedoms and our rights to assemble so that we may remember them. Amen. Remain standing. We're now going to go outside for the water ceremony and the placing of the wreath at the World War II monument. The throwing of the flowers into the water is a naval tradition that is in memory of those who died. We'll also be firing a salute and playing taps. The bridge that you will be standing on is dedicated to those who died at Pearl Harbor. So it's a proper place to hold this ceremony, especially today. Ask that we never forget that our freedom is not free, and that it is paid with blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice, and lives. Thank you.
Fire team! And put! Prepare to fire 3 volleys. 4 arm. Half right, peace. Ready! Aim! Fire! Aim! Fire! Aim! Fire! Half left, peace. Reset.